The night my husband turned 40, the house looked like something out of a magazine. Soft gold lights glowed across the backyard. A live jazz trio played near the pool. Crystal glasses clinked as investors, friends, and family toasted to Ethan Carter, self-made, brilliant, unstoppable. I had planned every detail. The guest list, the catering, the cake shaped like the skyline of Charlotte. I wanted him proud of me for once. When he raised his glass to give his birthday speech, I smiled, expecting gratitude. Instead, he turned toward me. "How dare you embarrass me like this?" he shouted. The music faltered. Conversations died mid-sentence. 40 pairs of eyes locked onto my face. I didn't understand what I had done. A second later, his hand moved quick, sharp, humiliating, not enough to leave a visible mark, just enough to redraw the entire map of my life. I left with tears in my eyes, heels unsteady on the driveway. 2 weeks later, we stood in a courtroom, and the judge said words that would cost him everything. "My name is Harper Carter, and for 8 years, I was the wife people admired." Ethan and I lived in a gated neighborhood outside Charlotte, in a white 2-story house with black shutters and a front porch swing we never used. On social media, our life looked curated. Sunday brunch photos, vacation sunsets, anniversary captions about building an empire together. People saw the empire. They didn't see the cost. Ethan built his real estate investment firm from the ground up. I was there before the first office lease, before the first investor meeting, before the first 6-figure deal. I answered emails when he was exhausted. I hosted networking dinners. I memorized the names of board members' spouses and the colleges their children attended. "You're my secret weapon," he used to say. At first, it sounded romantic. Later, I realized secret weapons don't get credit. When his company took off, things shifted. Not suddenly, not dramatically. Just gradually, like furniture being rearranged 1 inch at a time until you no longer recognize the room. He began correcting me in public. "Let me handle that, Harper. That's not quite how it happened. Smile more. At home, it was subtler. Why are you still friends with Claire? She's not ambitious. Do you really need your own account? We're married. I make the money. Let me manage it." By year 5, I had stopped arguing about the small things. By year 6, I stopped arguing about the big ones. If I hesitated before agreeing, he would sigh. "You always make things harder than they need to be." I started wondering if that was true. Ethan never screamed. He didn't need to. His disappointment was sharper than anger. He tracked our expenses for efficiency. He reviewed my calendar for security. He suggested what I should wear for branding. Branding. That was his favorite word. "Everything is image," he'd say. "Perception is power." And slowly I became part of that image. The polished wife, the supportive partner, the woman who stood half a step behind him at charity galas and nodded at the right moments. If something upset me, he would tilt his head and say, almost kindly, "You're being emotional." I learned to swallow my reactions. I learned to rehearse my sentences before speaking. I learned that love, in our house, felt conditional. But I also learned something else. Control doesn't feel like control at first. It feels like protection, like guidance, like someone knowing better. Until one day you wake up and realize you haven't made an independent decision in years. The night of his birthday party, when I stood beside him in that gold dress he had chosen, smiling at guests he had approved, I thought I understood the rules of our marriage. Keep the image clean. Don't outshine him. Don't contradict him. What I didn't know was that the rules would change without warning. And when they did, the illusion of perfection would shatter in front of everyone. For the first hour of the party, everything went exactly as planned. The jazz trio played near the pool. Investors gathered in small circles, laughing a little too loudly. The catering staff moved like choreography, champagne refilled before anyone had to ask. I stayed close to Ethan's side, smiling when he smiled, nodding when he spoke. I had done this dozens of times before. I knew the rhythm. When it was time for the birthday toast, someone tapped a glass. Ethan stepped forward, confident as ever. 40 years, he said, raising his drink. And the best is still ahead. Applause. Cheers. Cameras lifted. He gestured toward me. And of course, none of this would be possible without my incredible wife. People turned to look at me. I felt that familiar pressure to perform gratitude. So when it was my turn to speak, I kept it simple. I'm proud of you, I said. And I'm proud of the team that helped you build this. Ryan, especially this last deal wouldn't have happened without you. Ryan Mitchell smiled awkwardly. His wife squeezed his arm. The moment lasted 3 seconds. But I felt the temperature change. Ethan's jaw tightened almost invisibly. The applause faded. The music resumed. He smiled for the crowd, but his eyes were cold. 10 minutes later, he pulled me into the kitchen. His grip on my elbow wasn't violent. It was firm, controlled. What was that? He asked. What do you mean? You thanked Ryan. Yes. He helped close the deal. You made it sound like I couldn't do it alone. My stomach dropped. That's not what I meant. It doesn't matter what you meant, he said quietly. It matters how it looked. I stared at him, confused. It looked collaborative, I whispered. It looked weak, he snapped. Then, before I could process what was happening, his hand struck my cheek. Once. Quick. Not brutal. Not chaotic. Just deliberate. The kitchen door swung slightly from the force of it. I heard the music stop outside. Someone must have seen. Ethan stepped back immediately, smoothing his jacket like nothing had happened. Don't make scenes, he murmured. I felt heat rise to my face, not from pain but from humiliation. He walked out first. I followed a few seconds later, the world tilting slightly under my heels. The patio was silent, 40 guests pretending not to stare. Ethan raised his glass again and forced a laugh. Marriage, right? He said lightly. A few uncomfortable chuckles. No one met my eyes. I looked around at the people who had toasted our perfect partnership 10 minutes earlier. No one stepped forward. No one asked if I was okay. Image is powerful. An image protects the person who controls it. I picked up my purse. I'm tired, I said, though no one had asked. Ethan didn't try to stop me. He just leaned toward me and whispered, "You'll regret walking out." The driveway felt longer than usual. The sound of the party resumed behind me, music, laughter, the illusion continuing without interruption. I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel. My cheek throbbed faintly, but what hurt more was the realization that I hadn't been surprised. Some part of me had always known this could happen. Not the exact moment, but the possibility. Control, when challenged, escalates. And that night, in front of everyone, Ethan had chosen control over dignity. As I drove away, my phone buzzed. One message. You embarrassed me. Not, I'm sorry. Not, are you okay? Just accusation. I wiped my tears and kept driving, because something inside me had shifted, and I knew I wasn't going back, not the same way. I didn't go home. For a moment, I considered it. The habit of returning, of smoothing things over, was deeply wired into me. For 8 years, conflict ended the same way. I apologized, even when I didn't understand what I had done wrong. But that night, something felt different. Instead of turning toward our neighborhood, I drove across town to my sister Olivia's apartment. She opened the door in sweatpants and no makeup. The moment she saw my face, she didn't gasp. She didn't overreact. She just stepped aside and said, "Come in." That steadiness broke me more than anything. I sat on her couch and stared at my hands. "He crossed a line," she said quietly. I nodded. "He's crossed small ones before," she added. "You just kept moving the line." I didn't argue. I couldn't. The next morning, I woke up to 15 missed calls and 23 texts. "You left my party. Do you understand what that looks like? Investors were there. You owe me an explanation. Come home. Now." Not once did he ask if I was okay. Olivia handed me coffee and said, "You need a lawyer." The word felt dramatic. Heavy. Final. But so had the sound of his voice in that kitchen. By noon, I was sitting in the office of Laura Bennett, a family law attorney recommended by a friend of Olivia's. Laura was in her early 40s, composed, sharp-eyed, the kind of woman who listened without interrupting. I expected to feel ashamed telling the story. Instead, I felt organized. She asked precise questions. "Has he ever restricted your access to money?" "Yes." "Does he monitor your communications?" "Yes." "Has he isolated you from friends or family?" "Yes." "Has he ever made threats about financial consequences if you disobeyed him?" I hesitated. "Yes." Laura leaned back slightly. "Harper, what you're describing fits a pattern of coercive control. It's not just about one public incident. It's about power. Power. The word landed differently than abuse. Less emotional, more structural. Do you have documentation? She asked. I don't have access to most accounts, I admitted. He manages everything. That's common, she said calmly. We can subpoena records. The room felt steadier than my house ever had. What happens now? I asked. She folded her hands. First, we file for temporary protective measures. That includes freezing certain financial movements. Second, we document every communication from him. Third, we prepare. Prepare for what? For the possibility that he escalates when he realizes he's losing control. As if summoned by the sentence, my phone buzzed again. If you don't come home tonight, we're done. You'll regret this. You have no idea what I'm capable of. I showed Laura the screen. She nodded once. Save that. I don't want revenge, I whispered. Good, she replied. Revenge is messy. Accountability is clean. The distinction mattered. I wasn't trying to destroy him. I was trying to stop shrinking. Before I left her office, Laura asked one more question. Harper, do you want to go back? I opened my mouth automatically to say maybe, to say I needed time, to say it wasn't that simple. But the image of the kitchen flashed in my mind. The silence, the laughter that followed, the message accusing me. No, I said finally. And for the first time, the word didn't feel like defiance. It felt like clarity. That afternoon, Laura filed emergency motions with the court. Ethan still believed I would cool off and return. He left a voicemail that evening, his voice smooth again. Let's not overreact. You know I love you. You just pushed too far. I listened to it twice. Not because I doubted myself, but because I wanted to hear what manipulation sounded like when I wasn't inside it. He wasn't apologizing. He was repositioning. By the end of the day, Laura called me with an update. We filed. A temporary hearing is scheduled in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. The same amount of time it had taken for everything to fall apart. And maybe the same amount of time it would take to start building something new. 2 weeks sounds short. It isn't. When you're waiting for a court date, time stretches like thin glass, clear, fragile, and ready to crack at any moment. Ethan must have assumed I would fold. The first few days, his messages shifted tone. Let's talk like adults. You're letting your sister poison you. This is embarrassing for both of us. Then came the apologies. I was stressed. You know how much pressure I'm under. It was a reflex. I didn't mean it. Finally, when that didn't work, came the fear. If you push this, it will get ugly. You don't understand what's at stake. You think the court will believe you? Laura had warned me. When control fails, she said, they escalate or they negotiate. Watch for both. He tried both. What he didn't know was that Laura had already filed for a forensic review of our finances. When you marry someone who insists on handling everything, you assume that means stability. You don't realize it can also mean concealment. 3 days after I left, Ethan had moved nearly $500,000 from our joint business holdings into a newly formed LLC under his name only. It was subtle, technical, legal-looking, but it was fast. Too fast. He's attempting asset shielding, Laura explained over the phone. He thinks you won't notice, or that it's too complicated for you to challenge. The old version of me would have believed that. The Harper from a month ago would have thought, maybe I don't understand business well enough. But this time, I didn't doubt myself. I doubted him. We subpoenaed the records. The paper trail told a story Ethan never meant for me to read. Emails referring to me as non-essential. Messages to his accountant asking how to minimize exposure. Notes describing our marriage as a liability risk. Liability. 8 years of loyalty reduced to a spreadsheet problem. Laura found something else too. A clause in our prenuptial agreement. At the time of signing, I had skimmed it. Ethan's attorney had reassured me, standard language. But buried in Section 14 was a protective clause. In cases involving documented coercion, intimidation, or misuse of marital funds, the prenup's asset protection provisions may be re-evaluated at the court's discretion. You see this? Laura said, tapping the document. He thought the prenup locked everything down, but this clause shifts leverage if misconduct is proven. Meaning if we demonstrate financial control and intimidation, the court can void portions of the prenup. Ethan had built his empire on contracts. He never imagined one might protect me instead. Meanwhile, he began calling mutual friends, painting a narrative. She's unstable, She overreacted. She's being influenced. One friend forwarded me a message. It read, "Harper's having a breakdown. I'm trying to help her." For a moment, the old panic rose in my chest. What if people believed him? What if they already had? Laura listened quietly when I told her. "Public opinion doesn't decide cases," she said. "Documentation does." So we documented everything. Every text. Every voicemail. Every transfer. Olivia installed a security camera at her apartment door after Ethan showed up unannounced one evening. He didn't shout. He didn't cause a scene. He just stood there and said, calmly, "You're destroying your own life." "I'm protecting it," I replied. His expression flickered. Not anger. Surprise. For the first time, he was not dictating the conversation. "You don't even know how to survive without me," he said. Maybe that used to scare me. But now I saw it differently. It wasn't a threat. It was projection. He had built a world where I was dependent. And now that structure was cracking. The night before the hearing, Laura called. "Tomorrow isn't about proving he's a monster," she said. "It's about proving a pattern. What if he convinces the judge it was just a misunderstanding? Then we rely on facts." She paused. "Harper, remember this. Courts look for consistency. Your story has it. His doesn't." I hung up and sat in Olivia's spare bedroom staring at the ceiling. 2 weeks ago, I had walked down my driveway with tears blurring my vision. Tomorrow, I would walk into a courtroom with evidence in my hands. Ethan believed power meant never being questioned. He was about to learn what happens when someone finally does. The morning of the hearing, the sky over Charlotte was painfully clear. I remember noticing that. It felt unfair that the world looked so calm when my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Laura met me outside Mecklenburg County Family Court. She carried a leather briefcase and wore a charcoal suit that made her look like certainty itself. "You ready?" she asked. "No." "Yes," I answered. Inside, the courtroom felt smaller than I expected. Wood-paneled walls. A faint echo every time someone shifted in their seat. Ethan was already there. He looked composed. Navy suit, perfect tie, confident posture. If you didn't know him, you would have thought he was there to negotiate a property deal, not defend his character. When he saw me, he gave a small smile, the same one he used at investor dinners. Measured, controlled. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly as we took our seats. "We can settle privately." Laura stepped slightly in front of me. "We're comfortable proceeding," she replied. The judge entered. Honorable Judge Karen Whitfield presiding. Everyone stood. And just like that, the performance began. Ethan's attorney opened first. "Your Honor, this is a marital disagreement exaggerated by emotion. Mr. Carter is a respected business owner with no history of violence or misconduct." Violence. The word hung in the air. Laura didn't flinch. When it was her turn, she stood slowly. "This is not about one isolated incident. This is about a documented pattern of coercive control and financial manipulation." She handed the clerk a binder. Exhibit A. Text messages threatening financial consequences. Exhibit B. Screenshots restricting my access to accounts. Exhibit C. Financial transfers initiated days after separation. Exhibit D. Witness statements from party attendees confirming the incident. The room grew quieter with each page turned. Ethan shifted in his chair. His attorney objected. "Speculation." Laura remained calm. "These are not speculations. These are records." Judge Whitfield leaned forward. "Mr. Carter," she said evenly, "did you transfer substantial assets to a newly formed entity 3 days after your wife left the residence?" Ethan straightened. "I restructured business holdings. That's normal. Was your wife informed?" "It's my company." Laura stepped in gently. "It is a marital asset under North Carolina law." Ethan's jaw tightened. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. The judge's eyes sharpened. "Mr. Carter, you will address the court respectfully." Silence. Laura continued. "We also request consideration of the prenuptial clause under Section 14. I saw Ethan's head snap slightly. He hadn't expected that. Judge Whitfield flipped through the document. "Counselor," she said to Ethan's attorney, "were you aware of this clause?" The attorney hesitated. "It is conditional." "On documented misconduct," the judge replied. She looked directly at Ethan. "Mr. Carter, threatening to restrict access to funds during a marital dispute may qualify." He leaned forward. She lived off my income. The words echoed louder than he intended. The judge didn't raise her voice. Marriage is not ownership. The courtroom felt charged. Laura presented the forensic accountant's preliminary findings. Attempted asset shielding. Unusual liquidity movement. Internal emails referring to me as exposure risk. Ethan tried to explain. It was strategic. Protective. Protective of what? The judge asked calmly. He didn't answer. Then Laura introduced the witness statements. 2 guests testified via affidavit that they observed Ethan publicly strike me and dismiss it as a joke. Ethan's attorney attempted to minimize it. A minor gesture blown out of proportion. Judge Whitfield's expression hardened. In front of 40 individuals? The word 40 seemed to settle over the room like weight. This wasn't private. This wasn't quiet. This was public humiliation. Laura's final argument was simple. This court is not here to punish Mr. Carter's personality. It is here to protect Mrs. Carter's legal rights and safety. The judge took a long pause, long enough for my pulse to pound in my ears. Then she spoke. Mr. Carter, the court finds sufficient evidence of coercive behavior and financial maneuvering intended to disadvantage your spouse. Ethan's confidence flickered. For the duration of these proceedings, all major assets are frozen. He inhaled sharply. 50% of the business valuation will be subject to equitable distribution review. His attorney whispered urgently to him. The judge continued. A temporary protective order is granted, and the prenuptial agreement's enforcement is hereby suspended pending further review. The words came one by one, measured, unavoidable. Then she looked directly at Ethan. You are losing control of the assets in question until this matter is resolved. He swallowed. And for the first time since I met him 8 years ago, I saw uncertainty in his eyes. Not anger, not dominance. Uncertainty. He had built his identity around power. And now, in a quiet courtroom, that power was being audited. When the gavel came down, it wasn't dramatic. It was precise. Court adjourned. Ethan stood slowly. You've made a mistake, he said under his breath as we passed. I met his gaze. No, I replied. I stopped making one. Outside, the air felt different. Not lighter, but clearer. 2 weeks earlier, I had walked out of a party in silence. Now, I walked out of a courtroom with protection. And this time, the silence felt like strength. The parking lot outside the courthouse was quiet. No reporters. No dramatic applause. Just the hum of traffic and the sound of heels against pavement. Ethan caught up to us halfway down the steps. Harper. The way he said my name measured, almost patient, made my chest tighten for a second. That tone used to mean reconciliation was coming. Now I knew it meant recalculation. You really want to do this publicly? He asked. You think dragging my name through court helps you? Laura didn't answer. I did. You dragged me first. His eyes flashed. That's dramatic. Is it? I asked calmly. Because I remember standing in our kitchen with 40 people outside pretending nothing happened. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're making a mistake. You don't understand how business works. Freezing assets affects employees, investors, reputations. I almost laughed. There it was again. Reputation. Image. Always image. What about my reputation? I asked quietly. What about the emails calling me a liability? He froze. For a moment, I saw the calculation behind his eyes. Someone had shown me the paperwork. Someone had exposed the strategy. You weren't supposed to see those, he muttered. Exactly. Control depends on invisibility. When the paperwork is hidden, so is the power imbalance. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, something he only did when he was unsettled. You think this makes you strong? He said. Walking away? I didn't walk away, I replied. I walked toward protection. His jaw tightened. You'll regret this when you realize what you've thrown away. I thought about that. The house. The vacations. The dinners where everyone admired him. The version of myself that existed only to maintain his image. I didn't throw it away, I said. I survived it. For a split second, something flickered in his expression. Not guilt. Not remorse. Fear. Because control was slipping, and control had always been his currency. Laura gently touched my arm. We're done here. Ethan tried one last angle. Harper, we can still settle, quietly. I'll give you a generous agreement if you withdraw the coercion claims. Generous. As if dignity were negotiable. As long as the narrative protects you? I asked. He didn't answer, because the answer was yes. That afternoon, Laura called with updates. The asset freeze had already triggered internal scrutiny within his company. Investors were asking questions. Accountants were requesting explanations. Transparency spreads fast, especially when someone thought they were untouchable. Olivia met me for dinner that night. "You look different," she said. "Different how?" "Like you're not bracing for impact anymore." She was right. For years, I had lived in anticipation of Ethan's reactions, anticipating his moods, his corrections, his disapproval. That night, for the first time, I didn't check my phone every 5 minutes. I didn't rehearse apologies in my head. I didn't imagine what version of myself would keep the peace. Instead, I imagined something else. A life where I didn't need permission. The next morning, Ethan's attorney sent a formal settlement proposal. It was carefully worded, strategic. It offered a financial payout in exchange for dropping the coercive control claim and sealing court records. Laura read it and looked up at me. "This is about reputation management," she said. "I know. If you accept, you'll be comfortable." Quietly. "And if I don't? You'll likely receive equitable distribution and protection. But his image will take a hit. For 8 years, I had protected that image. Smiled through tension. Minimized discomfort. Explained away comments. Absorbed blame. Now I had a choice. Comfort. Or accountability. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who believed love meant endurance. Then I thought about the woman sitting in Laura's office now. The one who understood that protection is not punishment. "I'm not negotiating my truth," I said. Laura nodded once. Then we proceed. That evening, Ethan sent one final message. "You've changed." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Yes, I had. Not into someone cruel. Not into someone vengeful. Into someone awake. Control thrives when no one names it. The moment you name it, it weakens. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what happened next. Because whatever I lost in the process, it wouldn't be myself. 6 months is long enough for the noise to fade. Long enough for friends to choose sides. Long enough for headlines small as they were to disappear from search feeds. Long enough for someone like Ethan to realize that control does not survive exposure. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment now. It's smaller than our old house, but it has something that house never did: silence that doesn't feel heavy. There's a window in the living room that catches the morning light. I didn't realize how much I needed that until I had it. In the old house, the blinds were always adjusted for presentation. Here, I leave them open. No one corrects me. The court proceedings continued after that first hearing. Business valuations, asset reviews, forensic accounting. Ethan's company faced deeper scrutiny once the court froze the primary accounts. Investors demanded transparency. An internal audit uncovered irregular transfers that extended beyond our marriage dispute. Consequences have a way of multiplying once the first thread is pulled. The prenup clause held. The judge ruled that documented financial manipulation and intimidation qualified under Section 14. Portions of the agreement were suspended. Equitable distribution meant I was legally recognized as a partner in what I helped build. Not a liability. Not an accessory. A partner. The final ruling didn't come with dramatic speeches. It came with paperwork. Assets divided. Support awarded. Protective orders extended where necessary. Ethan's lawyer avoided eye contact the day everything was finalized. Ethan himself looked smaller. Not physically. Structurally. Like someone who had built his identity on being untouchable and suddenly found fingerprints everywhere. He tried once more, in the hallway outside the courtroom. "You could have handled this privately," he said. "I tried handling it privately for 8 years," I replied. He didn't argue with that, because we both knew it was true. The difference between us now wasn't anger. It was clarity. I started therapy in month 2. Dr. Simmons, soft-spoken, direct, asked me a question during our first session. "When did you start believing you needed permission to exist?" I didn't have an answer, but I'm finding one. I went back to school part-time for business management. The irony isn't lost on me. For years, Ethan told me I didn't understand the industry. Now I understand it legally, financially, strategically. Knowledge feels different when it's yours. Olivia still comes over every Sunday. We cook, we laugh. No one checks my phone. No one edits my sentences. No one measures my tone. Sometimes I sit on my couch at night and think about that birthday party. The music, the applause, the moment everything shifted. For a long time, I replayed it with shame. Now I replay it with gratitude. Because humiliation was the crack in the illusion. And through that crack, I saw the truth. Ethan once told me, perception is power. He was wrong. Truth is power. And truth doesn't need to shout. It stands, quietly, unmoved. 6 months ago, I walked out of a driveway with tears in my eyes. Today, I walk into rooms without asking where to stand. That's not revenge. That's recovery. There's something no one tells you about leaving. They tell you it's brave. They tell you it's strong. They tell you it's empowering. What they don't tell you is that it's quiet. It's waking up at 3 a.m. and wondering if you overreacted. It's hearing his voice in your head long after you've blocked his number. It's standing in the grocery store realizing no one is going to criticize what's in your cart anymore and feeling strange about that freedom. Healing isn't dramatic. It's repetitive. It's choosing not to answer when someone tries to pull you back into a narrative that shrinks you. It's learning that apology and accountability are not the same thing. Ethan apologized briefly, strategically, when it suited him. The court demanded accountability. There's a difference. One is about soothing tension. The other is about correcting harm. For years, I confused endurance with loyalty. I thought being patient meant being mature. I thought absorbing criticism meant being supportive. I thought minimizing myself kept the peace. But peace that requires silence isn't peace. It's containment. If someone ever says to you, "You're nothing without me," pause. Ask yourself why they need you to believe that. Control feeds on dependence. It weakens when you ask questions. It collapses when you document truth. The law is not perfect. Courts are not emotional. They don't respond to tears, they respond to evidence. That used to intimidate me. Now it comforts me. Because evidence doesn't care about charm. It doesn't bend for reputation. It doesn't applaud charisma. It measures actions. And actions tell the story. The night Ethan turned 40, he believed he was untouchable. He believed image would protect him. He believed I would protect him. 2 weeks later, a judge reminded him and me that dignity is not negotiable. I didn't win because he lost assets. I didn't rebuild because he lost control. I rebuilt because I stopped participating in my own erasure. My name is Harper Carter, not someone's liability, not someone's accessory, not someone's branding strategy, just Harper. And if you're listening to this while questioning your own reality, your own instincts, your own worth, hear me clearly. You are not dramatic for wanting respect. You are not unstable for demanding transparency. You are not selfish for protecting yourself. Leaving doesn't mean you failed. Sometimes leaving means you finally passed the test you didn't know you were taking. The night he tried to make me feel small in front of 40 people, I walked away with tears in my eyes. Today, I walk forward without looking back. And that more than any courtroom ruling is everything.